today I want to talk about a couple of different things. First of all, let me introduce the Broad Institute. The Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard, we actually split from MIT about 2.5 years ago. We're about 1,900 individuals, 1,000 of them are employees, and the other 1,000 scientists are scattered around Boston at Harvard, Harvard Medical School, MIT, Children's Hospital, and so on, all the different hospitals around Boston. And we have this very, this human cloud of scientific collaboration that occurs across Boston as well as across the world with various projects that we have. There's a number of different things that we study. There's a lot of work that's done in neuroscience. For example, what is the genetics of autism? What is the genetics of schizophrenia? The Human Microbiome Project, which I'll get into in a minute, understanding human cancer. I think one thing that you may have heard of that we were an active part of, one of the top 3 players in, was the Human Genome Project. You know, we were one of the main contributors of that. And to achieve that, we have a lot of technology platforms that we use to actually do that work. So some of these projects that we're beyond the Human Genome Project that we're working on at the moment is a 1,000 Genome Project, essentially a deep study around the genetic variation of the different human populations. You know, what is that genetic variation and how do we associate that with wellness, with disease, with treatment to drugs, and so on. Also another key project being the Cancer Genome Atlas. Any of you that may have been exposed to cancer or family members that have been exposed to cancer, the genetics of cancer is very different. It's an evolving beast. You may have the genetic information of an individual, but as that cancer divides, as that cancer changes, as it metastasizes, those cancers have a very different genetic profile. So understanding in an individual how their genetics are changing, and then looking within a tissue such as prostate cancer, breast cancer, and so on, and trying to find patterns across these different types of diseases, this is something that we're actively playing a leading role in. And one project here which really tickles my fancy, to use that term, is the Human Microbiome Project. For every cell in the human body, of which there are billions, there's over 20 microbes that are within your gut, in your mouth, on your body. So the virus, the yeast, the fungus, the bacteria that make us up, that has a genetic component as well. What is that genetic component of an individual, their microbiome, as well as that of a population? You know, we have some recent work, which isn't published yet, which looks at how people's microbiome changes with diet, how it changes according to where they live in the world or as they travel through the world, where some of that is tied to diet. Now think about it in terms of, you know, the saying, you are what you eat. That we have now evidence to show that how you eat changes your makeup, your genetic makeup from the microbiome purpose, which then has downstream effects in terms of how you may respond to drugs, how you may get ill, how you may stay well, and so on. So this is, I think, a very greenfield area in terms of drug development down the road as more and more discoveries come out here. Another interesting project which we can now talk about is documented in this book. We were one of the active members working with Johns Hopkins University and Stanford to actually elucidate the genome of Steve Jobs. And part of the work that we did there actually helped with very specific targeted treatments that prolonged his life as part of the research. So this, you get to page 531 or whatever it is, or 551, you'll see the Broad Institute of MIT actually called out there. And as you can see, I'm not using PowerPoint because Steve Jobs actually chided one of our investigators for doing a PowerPoint presentation in front of him. So I recently joined the Broad. I joined there about 6 months ago, and part of what I needed to do was to bring the team together, the IT team together, as well as the community, and to essentially to bring a purpose, to bring a focus to IT. And essentially in the 2 words, collaboration experience, that is what the IT group at the Broad of about 50 or so people are actually actively now working towards. From how fast and how we move the bits and bytes and the packets of data around, to how we secure the human subject data, which is very identifiable information as it relates to individuals. how we serve up applications, how we compute on the petabytes of data that we manage and the tens of thousands of computational cores that we have in our data center to actually compute on that. Now, with all of this, there's all the different forms of collaboration. How do I share my data? How do I collaborate with scientists in other places? One of the areas which I'm just going to talk about briefly is how do we enable the collaboration experience from a physical point of view as well as a virtual point of view. This is just a picture from the movie Tron, 1982, one of my most favorite movies. And I was in awe when I first saw this, where interacting with the master control program through this interactive surface. If you zoom to 2008, When the World Stood Still, the remake of that, you can actually see scientists in this sci-fi movie interacting around a Microsoft Surface where information is being displayed, being shared, being interacted with. We actually have a number of these units. First, I actually experimented with some of this work at Merck, where that's where I recently came from, where we did some work on imaging, medical imaging. And we also have this, we actually use this for educational outreach purposes at the Broad Institute, sharing information about what is biology, what is genomics, and so on. And we have a lot of students that come through to inspire them with respect to science that we do at the Broad. And this is also something that something that's a very important tool for us. One thing I would have liked to have shown is some new technology that we're just starting to experiment with called scalable desktop. Essentially, what you saw this morning in the auditorium with those big HD screens all connected together, that technology is now cost effective. For $30,000, I could equip a conference room with 4 projectors and stitch the images together electronically. So that is where you can then interact with that. So this is something that we're bringing to our scientists at the Broad Institute. In addition to the physical interaction, this, as you can see by the Merck logo on the bottom, this is something that I championed at Merck, using virtual collaboration technologies in a sort of World of Warcraft, Second Life type environment to bring people together so that they could interact. So we would hold conferences, 50 to 100 people, where people would, using a VoIP headset, they would communicate, share, and hold scientific poster sessions. So again, collaboration spaces is something that's very active on my mind at the moment. In fact, I have Lucas Colson in the audience here, which is leading some of this effort for me. Now, this is all great, information technology, and I love the technology, and I love the gadgets. I'm on an iPad here. But one thing that is also very important to me is more the psychology, the how do we get things done, and how do we interact with the users, and how do we get them to work a certain way. And one thing that also I started working on at Merck, and I'm going to be carrying forward within the Broad Institute, is using some of the metaphors coming out of the gaming industry. There's these 2 wonderful books. I actually like the first book from Jane McGonigal called Reality is Broken, about leveraging ideas for the video game world, the gamification of projects, of tasks, to actually drive people to work a certain way. Because, looking at the statistics, 69% of all head of households play computer and video games, 97% of all youths do, 40% of women do, 1 out of 4 gamers is over 50, the average game player is over 35, and they've been playing for 12 years, and most gamers expect to continue playing games for the rest of their lives. Gaming is something we may escape to, but it's also we get something out of it. And how can we bring that pleasure, that value, into the workforce, into the work environment to actually get people to work a certain way? Game developers know better than anyone how to inspire extreme collaboration, whether it's a World of Warcraft, building a clan, and 100 people battling a fortress, or, as I'll show in an example, how do we solve the protein structure of an enzyme for HIV? Again, just some statistics here. This is the Call of Duty and Battlefield series, where these are video games with level ups and merit badges and all these sort of things. People get false feedback, immediate feedback in terms of how they're progressing in the activity they're doing. And part of what we need to do is, how can we find the activities that we need people to do to comply with SOPs, or to curate data, or to do tasks that we need them to do as part of any activity in our organizations. So they get badges, they get unlocks, and they have this sort of reward curve in terms of how they're progressing in their activities in their games. Now let's look at a typical career curve. So on the left is what you see when you're playing video games. On the right, if you're lucky, over 20 years, this is how your career might look like, where every 4 to 5 years you get promoted. People desire constant reward, recognition, and feedback, whether they're outwardly asking for it or not. And we need to tap into this in terms of providing this into the systems. In fact, you can go to Twitter and find that people are actually gamifying SAP at the moment. So SAP is fun now, everyone. Whether you're a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout, there's badges. There's actually a group out there called the Nerd Merit Badges, where if you go help your family members, you can add a badge, put it on your sash, and show it. But this is all geared towards the IT gearheads, such as whether you can get your inbox down to 0 and maintain it. And people are buying into this. Here's one from a group called Science Scouts. And I love this because they've got some very creative ones. I love the badge, the I Make Weaponized Lasers badge, and it looks like the Death Star. If you actually go to this website, one of the better ones is I've had monkey poop thrown at me. There's some very interesting things. And people take these badges, they take these rewards, and it's literally a badge of honor. They are being recognized. So some of these sort of things I've been starting to do, mostly in a paper form to start with at the Broad Institute. Whenever my team goes above and beyond, I generate these certificates of merit, of honor, and I create custom little badges. This will be electronic one day, but at the moment, this is paper-based. So how is this turning into reality? You may have heard of something called Fold-It. I think it was called out earlier today. Essentially, it's video games for folding protein structures, where teams of people compete against teams of scientists, where they actually can find the most optimal structure for a protein. And as I mentioned recently, they actually solved the protein structure that for decades has not been solved for HIV, for one of the enzymes for replication. They did it in about, it's either 3 weeks or 3 months, using this gaming methodology, teams competing against teams. So, to wrap up, and thinking about some of the gaming metaphors, how can we drive collaboration in certain directions, using certain incentives, some carrots versus the sticks, which is typically the case? What value would be generated if we got people to work these ways? Thank you.